I've had readers who talk to me like after they've met me in person or after they've seen my social media, and they're like, oh no, you're really like that. And I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm really like this all the time. I just make myself bigger in person because I know I have to, because I'm a very short little person.
Hello, and welcome to Most Writers Are Fans, the podcast that explores the intersection between writing and fandom. My name is Terry Bartley, and I'm your host. So thank you so much for joining me. Today I have a great guest. Her name is Lou Wilson. Lou was another one of those many people that I met at LavenderCon, and I really liked. So Lou was also one of my my booth buddies, like Arden was, where we sat next to each other as we vended, and we talked a lot about marketing and stuff. Because guys, her stuff is like, her marketing is so slick and so smart, and you want to hear her advice because she's like good at this. This is like her deal. This is her thing. So if you're an indie creative that's looking at how to promote yourself or how you promote your work, Lou has those answers for you. So stick around for the interview. It's one you don't want to miss. So I listened to this podcast called Recovering Gleek. Basically, it's a Glee recap podcast where like Glee fans talk about things with the episodes that they either love or like maybe hit a little different now that we're older, things like that. And I love this podcast because, like, first of all, like, I love Glee. Like, Glee is one of my favorite shows of all time. It's a thing that I spent a lot of time. I feel like in a lot of ways, it was a thing that I put a lot of hopes and dreams into because it came out not while I was in college, but like shortly after I left college, because I left Marshall, the first college I went to, before I graduated. I ended up quitting college before I could graduate, and I moved back home. I had a bunch of credit card debt. I worked 2 jobs, but a lot of time kind of like trying to figure out how to make things work, and also like just like figure out what my life is after that. And the show Glee came out sort of like right around that time, and it was really instrumental in my life because it sort of helped me realize that like you can always strive for things, you can always want things. And I feel like this is something that does kind of connect all of us, and by us I mean like other independent creatives, like people that are like driven to do creative things, especially when you're from like a background and you grow up in a place where that's not like the norm. Like, it's not typical to want those things. And I often associate like the way that I feel like I've never fit in and like all these other things with this, like this desire to kind of like create and sort of like want, because I mean, like, let's be honest, like it does feel weird from like a societal perspective to like want people to consume your work and for people to like know your name and for people to like enjoy the things that you make. Like, it is a little weird to want that in today's society. So like me wanting that has always felt like I'm a bit disconnected from like everyone around me. And I felt that way for a long time. And Glee kind of allowed me to kind of like have this outlet where I didn't feel so weird. And I know the show sort of like does portray them all as outcasts, but I mean, I felt like that my whole life, right? So it sort of provided this connection that I didn't know I needed. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, is just kind of like this idea of like feeling like we're different. I always ask my guest, what a question that always comes up is, I say like, what's that moment where you decided to not just be like a hobbyist, but you wanted to like you wanted people to like read your work or to like consume the thing that you do? Because I feel like that is a thing, right? Because like I know plenty of people who have said that they have written novels and they're on their hard drives and they're perfectly like fine with them staying there forever and ever. And that's mind blowing to me because like I could never, like I could never do that. And it just doesn't seem fathomable to me that you'd want to create something and not have the world see it, you know? It's a thing that I always have my guests answer, and they always do have some answer for it, because I think it may be something that you either haven't thought about before, or like me, maybe they think about it too much. And I kind of love that that's kind of this thing that connects all of us, you know, that we like, because there's always this idea, this like pie in the sky idea of like, what is it to make it, you know, like when do you know you've made it, when do you know you're successful? And like for a lot of authors, just like having their book published, even if it's self-published, as a self-published author, I'm not belittling self-published people. Um, then that's the success. Seeing your book on the bookshelf, seeing your book for sale on Amazon, whatever. Sometimes that's like enough to feel like you've made it. I think that sometimes it does feel a little bit like there's like a hole inside of you that you're like trying to feel with like people's praise and adoration. And I don't think that's what I'm going for. I just feel like it's this belief that you have potential that is unfulfilled, you know? Is this belief that you have potential that you've never really been able to like capitalize on or been able to sort of like showcase to the world in a way that really demonstrates like the person that you are, or I guess should be, is kind of like what you're going for there. And I just think it's something that's sort of interesting about like this set of people that I sort of have in this podcast. Probably a lot of my listeners also fall in this category. And I just think it's really interesting to kind of like delve into that and just sort of like live in it for a minute, because like it is a thing that I think all independent creatives grapple with it, because I talk a lot with people about how like looking at numbers, whether it's book sales, whether it's the plays on Spotify for music or a podcast, whether it's like likes on social media, followers, all those things. How whenever you quantify like your own personal value with numbers, like it's just this dangerous game that you're playing where um you sort of like remove everything good about you that isn't tied to your creative thing, to like the thing that you do. And I think that it is sort of like and I just think it's important, but at the same time, like those are the metrics that you have to use to kind of like pursue like the goal of making it, like that sort of like mythical idea of making it. And it is sort of like this thing that I think we're always a bit of two minds of, like it's something that you always want. And part of me feels like I will always want more to some extent. And part of me doesn't think that's a bad thing. Part of me thinks that being driven, sort of like never settling for wherever I'm at, is like a good thing, because it means that I'm always growing, I'm always learning, I'm always like trying to do better and better. And that's not bad to do that. But then at the same time, it's like, should I ever be satisfied? Like, would it be okay to be satisfied for a little bit? And maybe, maybe it would. I sure don't know what that feels like. And it's just something I'd love to sort of like hear what you guys think. I'd love to know what you guys think about that, because I think it's something that we all kind of live with to some extent. And what does that look like for you? And did this resonate with anybody? Did anybody kind of like connect with this and go, oh yeah, hey, that's me? Because I'd love to hear that, so I don't feel I don't think I was alone, because like I said, I talked to a lot of people on this podcast that I feel like probably feel the same way as I do. But it does, when you live in a rural area that doesn't sort of like promote the arts in a way that feels like you fit. It's sort of on your mind all the time, and you do feel kind of alone. So let me know if you sort of like feel the same way as I do. All right, so thank you so much, guys. Like I said, stick around. Lou will be here very soon. Our conversation is a little less of a existential conversation. We have just sort of a great talk about like her career and what she sort of pursued to get into it, and also like what she how she markets herself and how we can kind of like learn from that. So stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Most Writers Are Fans. I am now joined by cozy urban fantasy writer Lou Wilham. Something I've been trying to focus on intentionally is like networking with other authors, and especially like genre authors, like people that do what I do, because that's truly how you grow your audience, is by people that like you could also like me. So like it makes sense to try to like do a bit of cross promoting there. And also I think you forget that part of it whenever you're in the trenches promoting. that you need to also like talk to other people that do what you do. So let's get into your writing. So cozy urban fantasy, very very cool of a very cool niche. Love that. What sort of got you into writing this way? Did you start there? Or
So
did you?
no, I didn't. I mean, my stuff has always kind of had like a cozy lilt. The very first thing I published was a novella called The Curse of the Black Cat, which was like a modern fairy tale with a cozy lilt. And then it just kind of like became my thing. And I was like, okay. But then the urban fantasy part came in where I was going to a event that was going to be, it was called Getting Witchy with It in Salem. And I was like, oh, I need a witch book.
Yeah.
I was like, I need a witch book. So I wrote a witch book, and then I was like, oh no, I like this. So then like I wrote The Hex Next Door, and then I wrote Overkill, which is my vampire book, because and then the world has just expanded.
I think that I like to ask people is, whenever you do like, there's plenty of people that write as a hobby and they're perfectly fine with it existing in the world, but not actually like publishing it. People like us feel like for whatever reason, people need to consume our stuff. We think that people need to see our things. When did that happen for you? Like, what was that moment like when you sort of like made the leap to not just being a writer, but, an author?
Yeah. So funnily enough, I grew up on, I don't know if you know, writing forums like role-playing game forums where you would like write your characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Two of my best friends that I've known for the last like 13 or 14 years, I had never met them in person until I got in my 30s, because I met these two women on these forums and we wrote together. And my one friend, Elle, who runs my publishing house, was like, no, you just need to just put your stuff out there. Just do it. She's like, you know what you're doing. Your writing is good. You have the marketing chops. Just do it. So she shoved me into it. And now here we are.
No, I'm very familiar with that because I was writing my first book that came out was just like a series of short stories that I was writing. I had written my novel the year before, but then I was like, I kind of want to write other stuff because I was like having trouble editing it. And then I was like, I'm just going to write other stuff just because I like writing original things. I'm tired of like not writing. You know how when you're in the editing trenches, you don't know how to edit. So you're like floundering. So I was writing short stories just kind of for the fun of it. And then one of my best friends was like, why aren't you like releasing this stuff? Like, do you have a plan to release it? And I was like, well, I'm putting it on a blog. I don't really know. And then like, he just really pushed me to like really do it. And I was like, all right. But I think that you need that push because like sometimes, because I think that first of all, with writing, you think there's a way that people say you're supposed to do it, right? Like you're supposed to query endlessly. You're supposed to like get rejected for years of your life until you finally stumble onto something that someone will like. And then you might have a career after that. And I think that we both decided like that's not the route for us. So what was that
well,
like for you?
I did actually query. My first full length novel was The Girl in the Clockwork Tower, which was a steampunk Rapunzel retelling, and I did query that for about a year, and everybody was like, steampunk is too niche.
Yeah.
And then I was like, all right, so I guess I'm just gonna take this to my friend's co-op and publish it there.
Yeah.
Like, fine. And then I got into it, like writing with the co-op and working with the co-op and realizing that I have a control freak problem. And I like not having somebody tell me what I can or cannot write or what my cover looks like, or I like being in control. So I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to do that again. I have queried more recently to try and get somebody to represent me internationally and to do audiobooks, because I've produced a couple of audiobooks and they're just such a pain in the neck.
It's a lot.
They are so work intensive because you have to work really close with the narrator, and then you have to like go over everything they do, and if they make changes you have to go over them again, and it takes so much time. And I'm like, no, if somebody else could do this so I could just focus on writing, I would be happy.
Well, and I get that because I remember I was really adamant about having an audiobook for my book, not even because of like just the coolness of having an audiobook, which admittedly it is cool to have an audiobook, but like the accessibility part of it, right? Because I'm not going to be releasing a Braille book because that would be way too expensive to release as an indie author. But like an audiobook does allow for like blind people to read, or like people that struggle with reading, it provides accessibility. And that's why it was important to me. But you're right. It's a pain to produce. Like, it's hard to produce.
It is. It's very time consuming. And it's not even like it's particularly labor intensive. It's just, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Which is literally every problem with self-publishing, is that there's just not enough time, because everything is a lot of time. Talk me through like what the process has been like once you started releasing it, like from the beginning to now. Feel free to skip over parts, but like what sort of jumped out at you? What are things you've learned along the way?
Okay, so we had this discussion before we started where we were talking about when we started publishing, and you're coming up on your 1-year anniversary, or you just passed it?
I'm a little past
recently?
it. Yeah, just past it.
Yeah, I just passed my 5th in October. So I started off publishing novellas, and when I was publishing novellas, I was very much going like flying by the seat of my pants. Didn't really, especially the writing part. I was like, I know how to write a story. I know how to do that. Yeah. That's fine. So the first few things I wrote, I didn't outline at all. And then the more I started going, I was like, I do know how to write a story, but having the outline really helps. So eventually I started outlining, and it got to the point where I read Save the Cat Writes a Novel. And I went back through the first draft of my second novel, and I like tried to line it up, and I was like, oh, I'm actually following this. And it's fine, but it's still having the outline off to my side while I'm drafting. If I ever get stuck, it becomes much easier. So that's one of the things that like I always recommend. I know a lot of people are like, yeah, but I want a pants. And I'm like, okay, but it can really only take you so far. Yeah. Trust me, I know. And part of the thing I realized is that I get to the middle of a story and I get bored. And I get a new shiny idea and I want to switch. But if I have the outline, I have oh yeah, but if I just wait for a little bit longer, then I get to write these things next. Yeah. And that helps. The other thing I've learned is, as we were talking about, networking is kind of a big deal. And it's not, I know a lot of people, I have a couple of friends who have really bad anxiety, and they're like, how do you do that? And I was like, I literally just reach out to people and I'm like, hey, you and I have this thing in common. Like, we both like this thing. And it's a lot easier when other authors share, like, if they're into a certain fandom, because then I can be like, hey, you like that, I like that. And then eventually you just get to the point where you're friends. And that's, I prefer that than the whole transactional, like. Yeah. Like, I will cross-promote any friend thing, and they will, if they cross-promote mine, that's great. But I prefer having friends. Especially because I don't have any, like, people who get the whole writing thing in my immediate vicinity. Yeah,
I get that. And I will say it probably feels more genuine too, because I can tell you the number of times that I've had like a podcast guest who then like doesn't even share that they were on the podcast, and it's like, can you not even like a post occasionally? But if you're actually friends with somebody, then you will naturally. Like, it feels like it actually probably is it's not just that it's not transactional, but you actually do get the benefits of a transactional friendship without having to like work on it, which is probably like,
and it feels like less skeevy.
Yeah, like, for sure.
It feels less slimy, because it's like, oh, you're promoting the thing because you like me as a person, not because I'm bugging you. Right. But yeah, I have a couple of people who my friend Whitney is like, how do you do that? How do you deal with that? Because sometimes people just ghost you or they reject you. And I'm like, yeah, okay, then they do. Right. They don't know me. I don't know them. We're at that early point where it doesn't matter. But if it happens further on down the road, it does.
Yeah. I've been doing the podcast long enough now that I've had those moments where like I think I'm better friends with people than I am, and then it gets really like heartbreaking whenever like they start distancing themselves for like life reasons, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's not even that they're like it's just that we don't live in the same place and we're like trying to maintain a friendship, and then it's hard. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that, but it does hurt still, even though like it shouldn't. But but it is that thing where it's like you have to just sort of accept like I said, like, we have different lives. We don't live in the same place. Like, our day-to-day lives are not, it can't always be this. And it's hard to maintain friendships like that. Like, it's hard to maintain like long-term friendships like that, much less new friendships. So I think that it's a thing to keep in mind too. Like, it's like you said, it's okay if people sort of drift or don't get back to you. Like, they just weren't meant to be your friends, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is that you've got to think that those kind of relationships actually take work. Like, you can't just reach out to somebody and expect them to do all of the work in it. It has to be, you have to put yourself out there too. So that helps.
Just out of curiosity, anything you're writing now, anything you're sort of excited about promoting or writing now that...
I am working on the 4th book in my Witches and Moondale series, and I'm worried about it because I feel like I've put them into a lot of really hard situations. And I'm like, this feels like it's very boom, 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 boom. And this is supposed to be a cozy book. And I'm worried people are going to be like, what did you do? You hurt them. Yeah, that's kind of... So, but it's been really fun because I'm like, I keep putting them into these situations and I'm like, okay, now how am I going to get them out of it? How? Because it's got to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you have plans as an ongoing, or is it like a set number of series in your head?
Witches of Moondale is going to have at minimum 5 books because I want the main couple to get married. Hunters of Ironport is going to have at minimum 5 books because it's a poly ship and it doesn't start as a poly ship. So all 3 of the dudes kind of have to figure out how that's going to work together. Fae of Eventide, I don't know how many books it's going to be, but probably 5 at minimum. But it's one of those things where I'm like, I'll write 5 because I know where I want the relationship to be. But if people still are like chomping at the bit for this series, I'll keep writing it.
Yeah.
It makes me happy. I like the world. The characters are fun. I'll keep writing it. I'll keep giving them problems.
And people like wanting to read a thing that you're writing is like the dream, right? So
Right,
may as well keep living it.
This is actually the first series I've done that is open-ended. Because the first couple I did a duet, and then I did 2 with 4 books each.
Yeah. I really, as like a nerdy person that reads a lot of like comics and stuff, the idea of writing like a universe has always appealed to me because like it's so cool to think about being able to bounce around to different characters but still reference things you've already established. And also, we talked about this last episode, which is like when you build a world, like a fantasy or sci-fi world, it's a lot of work, and you don't want to like you don't want to just throw it away.
Right, right.
Writing a few books in it.
I actually have another idea for another book that originally it wasn't going to be in the world. It's The Mummy but Gayer. And it wasn't going to be in the world, but then I kind of had a backdoor introduction to one of the characters in one of the other books. And I was like, oh, well, I guess they're all set in the same place now. I guess it's all the same world now. At least that means I don't have to figure out the magic system again.
Yeah. No, and I think there's something kind of great about it. And honestly, cozy about that as a writer, because like you could go back to things you're comfortable writing, and that's very cool to have that to go back to. Welcome back to Most Writers Are Fans. So I wanted to talk about marketing with you specifically, Lou, because once again I'm joined by Lou Wilham. Need to remind people that you're here just in case. But so we're gonna talk about marketing, and I want to talk about this with Lou because whenever I saw your booth at Lavender Con, you had like really slick marketing, like you like really got it. And it just looked really good. And I think that marketing is a thing that authors, especially indie authors, honestly, period authors, though, struggle with. Because, like, I think part of it is that a lot of us are more introverted naturally. So it's hard to put ourselves out there. I say we as I'm not that. Obviously, I have a podcast. But, but like, a lot of authors are. But I think that what you are demonstrating is that it doesn't actually matter that much because you can do other kinds of marketing and make yourself look good and professional that doesn't even have to do with a social media presence or whatever. So I'm just curious kind of like how you, like what you've discovered, what you've sort of like leaned into.
The first thing I want to say is that I actually took marketing in school. Like that was what I minored in when I got my bachelor's of science or whatever, BS, whatever it's called, was marketing. I majored in mass communications, minored in marketing. So I already had some that's what I was going to do with my life. I was going to go into social media marketing because I was like, that's the thing that I want to do. And then I didn't. Then I became an author.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've learned is that look at other authors, look at what they're doing, pick what works for you and discard what doesn't. I know when I did Lavender Con, a lot of people really liked my cards that I had that were in my books. And I picked that idea up from a different author. Another author had that. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool idea. And then my addition to that was I added little hearts to say what representation was in it so that people could look at it at a glance and go, oh, that's sapphic. Got it. And know what they wanted. And that does help especially for if you're at an event in person, because I had a lot of time. I've been to a lot of events where I get really crowded. There are a lot of people around my table. And while I like to talk to everybody one-on-one, I can't sometimes get to everybody right away. So it gives people time to like, they can look at the cards while I'm dealing with somebody else and then come back to them. So that helps. The other thing is I actually, in addition to marketing, I actually went to school for graphic design a little bit too. So I have that background as well. Like that was always one of my hobbies, was graphic design and photography. And so that helps.
First of all, very cool that you went to school for marketing, because it probably feels good to hear that I've noticed that you have good marketing.
It
Knowing that you
does.
have like experience, because it's great to know that you're using your degree in some way and people are
Yeah,
noticing.
I'm like, I'm paying that student loan. It needs to go somewhere.
So first of all, very cool that you have that background. My background is in journalism, which, you know, this is how I'm using that degree. But I do think that I think it's hard to do. You know, like I've done like PR stuff in my background, like as a journalism person, because PR and you know, journalism overlap a little bit. But like advertising has always been a bit of a like uphill climb for me, because it's not like what I naturally do, you know? And I think what I always struggle with personally is, you know, like I'm okay with trying to build like a social media presence. I'm okay with being like my authentic self and like doing videos, things like this. Because like I feel okay doing that stuff, but then I always feel like, but I'm not talking about my book or my writing at all, and is that okay? And it's a thing that I always worry about. Is it's not that I don't even talk about it enough. It's like sometimes I don't even talk about it at all, and it feels like a thing that I'll constantly forget. What has sort of like the social media landscape been like for you? Because it is sort of
It's definitely a balancing act. But I've kind of realized that over the years, I've kind of, my books and like my persona, which, you know, I am very much who I am all the time, but, you know, people have asked me how I deal with events, and I'm like, well, I'm just myself. I'm just louder.
yeah.
I'm just bigger. I make myself bigger so that I take up more space and people notice me more, but I am this person all the time. Like I have had readers who talk to me like after they've met me in person or after they've seen my social media, and they're like, oh no, you're really like that. And I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm really like this all the time. I just make myself bigger in person because I know I have to, because I'm a very short little person. You've met me.
Yes,
I'm small.
I have seen it for myself.
I am under 5 foot. I have to be loud. So I think that it's a delicate balance, but I also think it helps for me personally, because like, this is just who I am. I'm a writer. That's my life. I write books. This is what I like to write. I write what I would like to read and what makes me happy. And that makes it easier for me to integrate my books into my, you know, when I talk about myself. Like, it's very, I would say probably about 10 to 1. It's personal posts. Like I'll do like 9 marketing things and 1 personal thing. Or I'll have days like shortly after the election where I posted that I was like, you know what? I'm not going to go and be nasty about this. I am very upset about it, but I'm not going to be nasty, and I'm not going to block people because I want you to see me. I'm not going anywhere, but I want you all to know that I'm going to continue writing my books, and I'm going to continue hopefully making people happy that are around me. And that's just who I am. So I think that helps. But
yeah, I like having a balance, like having a number like 10 to 1, I think is probably going to be wildly helpful for people, because I think the thing that people think is hard about marketing, especially like indie authors, is that there's so little direction, because, you know, like everybody has different things to say. There's tons of people who have things to say about social media. None of it is wildly helpful. And
that's true.
And and I think that a lot of people just give up because it's like, well, I don't know what to do. So like, where do I even, you know, where do I even start? So I think that just having like concrete things like that, even if, for the record, even if like the number is wrong, having a number I think is useful for people, because then they can do something. You know what I mean? Like then they can move forward and do anything. So whenever you sort of started this, do you feel like you started out sort of like running with your marketing, or do you feel like it was a build up, like you had to sort of eventually figure out what worked?
I had to figure out what worked. It was one, and I tell this to a lot of people. I'm like, well, what works for me won't work for you. because I'm a different person than you are, and my books are different than yours are. So you really have to kind of just figure out what works for you and what works for your audience, and how best to find the people that you're trying to find. And a lot of that comes down to being genuine and just, like, you look at some people's posts and you're like, oh, that doesn't even sound like a real person.
Yeah.
That sounds like you're performing instead of being who you are. And I feel like that's one of the big draws from my platform and my books, is that they're not just buying my books, they're buying into the person that I am. And I feel like that works. And I know that can be exhausting for people. I know it can, because everybody's like, well, I don't need everybody all up in my business. And trust me, I get it. But you don't have to put everything out there. You know what I mean? You just have to pick what works for your brand and be that person, a couple times a day when you post on social media. And then or if you schedule ahead of time, scheduling helps a lot too.
I think too, this is sort of crossed my mind, but I think it's probably accurate. It is like, I think that because most of us weren't always indie authors, we've had social media presences that were just for our friends or whatever, like we've just, like, we're used to using it in that way. And I think that it's hard to realize, like, because the truth is, like, I would love to be able to have like 2 separate Instagram accounts, one's personal, one's not. I'm not gonna post to both. That sounds exhausting. Like, it's not gonna happen. So like, I think that's where the balancing act is. Like, you want to still have you want your friends to not be bombarded with marketing, but at the same time, like, it is like, that is what we're doing now, basically. Like, that is, like, once you sort of start doing this, like, your brand is you, and
right.
like your social media presence, anything public, you just have to presume is part of your brand, whether or not you want it to be. And if you don't want it to be, then make it private, right? Like, that's the option. But I think it is hard to balance that, because, like I said, like, I would never have a personal and a private account, like a public and a personal account, because, like, it's just too much to balance, because it's a lot to post to social media, period, right? Like, whether it's personal or so I think that when you're doing it for marketing purposes, that it's like, well, this is just where I am now, and people just need to get used to seeing marketing for my stuff.
Lou is a pen name. So I actually have like a, private life and everything. And I don't actually have a personal Instagram for my real name at all. Partly because I help run my co-op's Instagram. I run my big gay book tours. I have a Instagram for my cover business. And then I have my Lou Instagram, and I cannot do all of it.
Yeah.
like, I'm sorry. And it doesn't, for me, it's like, okay, well, I'm not personally in touch with anybody who I went to high school with. I found my friends, the 2 friends that I have that I met online, and those are my best friends. And then I've made new friends along the way. I don't have anybody from like when I was in high school or before then. And if I want to talk to my family, they find me on Facebook. So I don't feel like I'm bombarding them with my, buy my book.
Well, and 2, I think that's a good point, which is that once you start actually trying to grow your platform, the majority of the people followed you because you're an author, or they followed you because you're Bookstagram, because whatever, because there's some overlap with the thing that they do, and they're following you for that reason. So, like, they're not going to feel like it's bad that you're posting about the thing you do, because that's why they followed you.
Right. Yeah,
that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, actually, like, none of my family follows my Lou Instagram. None of them do. I mean, they all know I have books. They all know my pen name. They know, like, I'll occasionally share when a new book comes out on my Facebook, but, like, none of them follow me on Instagram because they don't want to see me constantly promoting my books. And I'm like, that's fine. They're not for you. So.
Well, and 2, this is a whole other conversation maybe, but like, we maybe need to start realizing, like, the people in our lives that aren't part of our online, like, whatever your online presence is, like, for us, it's like our books and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. For people that aren't, like, maybe your life should just, like, the people that aren't part of that should maybe just be offline. You don't need to be on social media with people that you care about. You can text people, you can call people, like, you don't have to have, pictures you're sharing publicly for them to be in your life. And I think that that's something that just is bad about society, that we've sort of accepted that that's the norm, is you have to start doing that.
Yeah, I definitely keep it separate, because I'm just like, they know what I write. They know how to find my books if they want to find them. they don't need to constantly be bombarded with, hey, I wrote a new book, because I put out 5 a year.
Yeah.
They don't need that. And I don't need them constantly trying to, like, I know a lot of writers feel squiggy about their relatives reading their books. And for me, I'm like, I don't care if you read it, whatever. But I know you're not going to like it, probably, because it's not going to be your bag. And that's fine. I don't care. I didn't write it for my family. I wrote it for me and for people who read things like what I read. So that's my audience.
And I think you do eventually start becoming comfortable with people that you know in real life following you, just accepting that they're going to like it or they won't. And it doesn't matter if they don't, you know?
Right.
Like, because I've had, as a high school teacher, I've had students follow me here and there. And it's just like, whatever. Like, they're just going to see me sharing the things that I do. Like, God forbid they get inspired by what I do. You know?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
that's all that might happen from that. So, like, I don't expect anything out of it. But also, like, if they don't actually care to follow me and they don't like the things I'm posting, cool. Like, I don't want to be their friend anyway. They're my student. You know, like, that's not what my life is.
I definitely think it helps to keep it separate. And I also know a lot of writers who, like, hate social media. Like, there's a huge portion of writers who are like, oh, social media is the bane of my existence. And I'm like, I think you're thinking about it a little too hard. It's part of the problem. Like, you're putting too much emphasis on it and too much onus on it. And it's not that serious. And treating it like it's not that serious and treating it like just it's an extension of, like, what I'm already working on it's worked for me. Like I said, it makes me feel more genuine to my readers. And I actually have readers who will just contact me. Like, I have one of my readers was messaging me the other day, and I was like, hey, you said you were kind of going through a thing. Do you want to talk about the thing? And she was like, oh my God, yes. Please, I will talk to you about the thing. So I don't know. But it just feels like if they're putting too much onus on it and they're treating it more like it's a professional thing, like they have to be like a big name brand. But you're not a big name brand, you're a person. And that's what you need to be first.
And honestly, most readers that like indie authors want to follow people, They don't want to follow a brand.
Exactly. Like, I'm not Michaels. I'm not Joanne's Fabrics. I'm not Harlequin Romance. I am Lou. And so.
Well, and like you said, like, after the election, the statement you released about, like, I'm going to keep writing my books. I'm going to be here writing gay books for people. Like, that is you being you. That's not you releasing a public statement about, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's a good example too. Like, that was you just sort of like expressing your personal, like, like, take on this. That isn't like a PR tested, like, statement about the election, which I think is something that, like, we don't have to do that,
Yeah, you don't have to be performative about anything. Like, you can just be honest with how you're feeling and be like, hey, so I'm kind of upset, and y'all are upset, but I'm going to keep writing my gay books. Like, until I can't anymore, I'm going to keep doing it. And then a couple of days later, I posted, like, I think I tagged you in it. I had, like, a rainbow of indie books that I had gotten throughout this past year by meeting other authors at other events. And I was like, well, I'll just share all these cool indie books that are all queer. So yeah, I don't think people, I feel like they treat it too much like it needs to be, like, sanitized, like, it needs to be cut and dry. You can't have any typos. You can't express any real feelings. You have to, like, be performative and be on all the time. And you don't really have to. Sometimes you can just share a picture of your cat.
Yeah. And I think too, like, understanding, and this may be something you have to do consciously or maybe unconsciously, but, like, realize, like, what parts of yourself are you okay sharing and what parts of yourself aren't you okay sharing.
Right.
And, like, don't cross that line. Like you have to sort of, like, understand that if part of your life is separate, like, that's okay. but you need to make sure that it stays separate,
Right. Like, I'll post pictures of my dog, but I don't post pictures of my family. Yeah. I like we said earlier, I live with, my parents and my brother and the brother's boyfriend and our dogs and our garage gremlins who are cats. And you will see my pets, and you will occasionally see my mom. And, like, when my grandmother passed a couple of years ago, I talked about that. But I don't really post pictures of my family because my Instagram is public, and it has to be okay with them that it's public before I post it. So.
Well, and to that point too, like again, I think that a lot of times we look at like holidays as like easy content because it's like, oh, I could share a Merry Christmas post because that's an easy thing to do. You know what I mean? Um, but also keep that in mind. Like, don't share a picture of your mom for Mother's Day just because it's Mother's Day.
Right.
Like, you have to be
Right.
okay with doing, understand what you're doing when you do that. You know?
Right. You have to know your boundaries, and you have to know the boundaries of the people around you as well, and you have to respect that.
Yeah. So I agree. Like when you said it was a balancing act in the beginning, like that's a big part of it. You know, is just
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, so just to get into kind of the nitty gritty, because I think that again, I think this will be helpful for people. Like, have you thought, like, how do you think about like the frequency that you post and things like that? Because I think that that's where people get really tripped up. Is like, I have to post every day or 3 times a day or whatever. Like 3 times a day for the record. No, don't do that. That's
Yeah, no,
too
don't do
much.
that. That's way too much. I've talked to a lot of authors who like another member of our co-op at one point was Jenny Hickman, and she has since gone on to publish by herself, but because she became a lot bigger. But she was, for a little while there, only posting 3 times a week, and I post once a day, except for usually on weekends, or if like at the beginning of November I was not posting because I just wasn't feeling it, and that's okay too. And your readers will understand that because they're like, oh, well, you're going through something. I get it. So it's not really like a hard fast number. It's more of a consistency thing. You have to be consistent. Whatever you're going to do, you have to keep doing it. And you just have to figure out what works best for you.
It's like once a week is probably okay, but just make sure that it's always once a week. Like that kind of thing.
Well, I wouldn't go with once a week. I feel like that's maybe too little because it's only 4 times a month, you know?
Yeah.
But like 3 times a week, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And the rest of the days you focus on writing or editing or whatever else you got to do.
Well, yeah, and then to like a 10-to-1 personal, that's maybe what, like 2-3 personal posts a month. Like that's not bad.
Oh, don't make me math,
like...
dude. Don't make me math.
I barely did it. 2 to 3 is like not at all. That's probably not even right. But
I don't even know.
But what I'm saying is, it's not a lot. You don't have to figure out a lot of personal stuff to post. Like and probably a lot of it is just like, I'm reading this or something. Like it's not even...
and you don't even have to post, like, if you're not feeling comfortable with posting a personal thing that month, you don't have to. It's all in what you're comfortable with, because if you're not comfortable with it, it's not going to come out genuine, and if you're not being genuine, then it doesn't work.
Well, and two, like, I just posted like a very broad Wicked review because I just saw Wicked and I shared a picture of the poster. That was personal because like I like Wicked and it's my opinion, but also like not real personal, right? Like it's very broadly a mainstream kind of thing, but that's also okay. Like that's also a personal post, and that's okay, you know?
Yeah, a lot of the personal posts I do are generally about like my writing process, or like if I'm having a like I think I did a post mid-November where I was doing my publishing house did a like our own Rimo. We did MIDI Rimo, which was Midnight Tide writing month. And I had planned to get the whole 4th Witches book drafted. And then the first 2 weeks of November hit, and I got no writing done.
Yeah.
So I was way behind. So I did a personal post about, hey, sometimes you got to move the goalpost because stuff happens, and that's okay. So sometimes I just talk about like where I'm at in my writing journey or whatever draft I'm working on, because people like to see that.
Yeah. And I will say I did think that was really cool. The like progress update thing. Because first of all, I think it's cool as a writer because it gives you accountability. Like you feel some responsibility to like, you don't want to say I'm drafting a thing and then never post about it again.
Right.
Like it's you actually like committing to a thing, which I think is a cool thing to do.
Right.
Just because like if you set goals and then you tell people about those goals, you're more likely to accomplish them. Right. And that's just a true thing generally in life. And that's a cool way to do it, and also have content out of it, which I like. Right. But also like it's a way to get people excited about the things that are coming up, which is also kind of cool. So I did really enjoy like is that a kind of thing that you brainstorm with your team about, or is that a thing that you like those kinds of things?
Well, we decided that we were going to do this. I think in the summer was the first one we did. I think we did the first one in the summer, and that was after all the NaNoWriMo stuff kind of hit the fan. where she was like, all right, well, we're not doing that. So she was like, how about we do our own, where we have a Slack channel for all of us, for all the writers. So she'll pair us up with another writer, and then that'll be your accountability partner. And we work, I'll message my accountability partner occasionally, be like, hey, what you doing? What you doing? How many words you got done? So you've got somebody to cheer you on and to kind of bug you if you need somebody to be on your case. But she also created graphics for us to use and all that kind of stuff. And she had a calendar of different posts we could do for content for each day, if that's what you wanted to do. But I did not do that because that was too much work.
And you can find tons of things like that out there,
right?
As an indie author, as a self-published guy, you can find that stuff out there. You don't have to have a full network. So just wanted to throw that out there for other.
Or you can build your own. I have a couple of writers who, one is from MPP and she hasn't published her own work yet. Who, when we did our writing retreat over the summer, they were like, how do you do what you do? You publish 5 books a year. And I'm like, I write almost every day. That's how I do what I do. What are you talking about? It's not rocket science. I just do the thing. And they were like, can you bully me? So I have a separate Instagram message account or Instagram message thread where I occasionally at the beginning of the month, I'm like, all right, so what are we doing this month? What's our word count looking like? Where are we at? What are we going to do? And I'll poke them every once in a while just to see if they're on task.
Yeah.
So you can come up.
We need that. We need people to hold us accountable, because it's really hard to hold yourself accountable when there's nobody else doing it for you.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing about having I've already picked my deadlines for next year. I have all my release dates already picked. And so I know when I need to have those things drafted by. And if I don't, then I feel bad because my readers are waiting for those things. So that helps too.
Yeah. Love that. And you I think that what you mentioned is great advice, period, which is it's not even just that your co-op group has a group of authors on a Slack channel. You can have a group of authors on a Discord channel or in a message thread or whatever that you're friends with that you could bounce ideas off of. And I think that that's something good to keep in mind too. You don't have to be in this alone, even though we often feel like we are. You don't have to be.
Yeah, we talked about networking in the beginning, and the other reason networking is so important for writers is because it's so solitary, and also because we can become an echo chamber for ourselves. So I'm one of those people where if I get myself into a problem, I need to usually talk it out. I don't need somebody else to input. I just need them to listen. So I figure it out myself.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes it's not even out loud. Sometimes it's just a text thread. But you know what I mean? Getting it somewhere else where I can process it differently. And having other writers to be able to look at, just be like, all right, she's doing it again. Okay, just let her talk. That helps because my family is like, what are you doing? They're characters. You make them do what you want. And I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't.
They do what they want, and
I'm just along for the ride. Exactly. So the networking thing just becomes so important in that way. Also because of the cross promoting, which greatly helps, but it's not, it's also about having community.
Yeah, and I just think it's good to have other people that. That's why I do this podcast. In the beginning, I did this podcast for the cynical reasons of we could cross promote and I can have people on and it'll help me grow my brain or whatever. I've kept doing it because I love this. I love talking to people that do what I do, and it makes me feel less alone and it makes me feel inspired by seeing what other people are doing. It motivates me to do this, and I think that that's something that's cool to think about. And you don't have to even have a podcast. You could just talk to people, or whatever. You could. Like you said, you can message them and say, hey, I also My Hero Academia. Let's talk about it for a while. Well, I feel like we could go on for a while, but we probably should go ahead and call it because we're 10 minutes over already.
Sorry.
No.
Did you have any final marketing questions you wanted to ask me?
No, I feel good.
Okay.
Most of this is so that we could bounce ideas off of each other. And like you said, see what you're doing, see what I'm doing. We can grow together by stealing ideas from each other, but also because we're not stealing. These are just things that we think could work or could not work for our stuff.
Right.
You got to try and find out. So no, I'm fully good.
Okay.
But but if people would like to find out more about you, where should they go to do that?
Okay, so I'm on Instagram at lou.wilham. And then I have a website, which is lewinprogress.com. And that's it, because I have other social medias, but I never update them because it's too much work.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This was really great. I've really enjoyed
you.
chatting with you. Most Writers Are Fans is a Starlight King production. Special thanks to our guest, Lou Wilson. The audio and video for this episode of Most Writers Are Fans is edited by Andre Williamson. You can find video episodes of Most Writers Are Fans on YouTube and Spotify. If you'd like to support the podcast, please rate and review it. Also make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to send a message or record a voice message or leave a comment, please visit mostwritersaretfans.com. You can also email us at press@starlightkingpress.com. Thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be afraid to tell your story.